The black SUV pulled up slowly, like it wasn't sure it belonged there. And then the door opened, and a man stepped out in a dark wool coat. The kind you don't buy in this country, unless someone overseas sent it to you. And he walked straight toward OC's Dry Cleaning and Alterations on the corner of Jane and Finch, like he owned every crack in that pavement. Chinara was in the back, hemming a dress for a woman who needed it by Saturday. She didn't look up right away. She heard the bell above the door. She heard her Uncle Quabina say, "Good afternoon, sir," in that careful voice he reserved for customers who looked like they might complain. She still didn't look up. She had $47 in her checking account. She had a rent payment due in 9 days. She had a dress to hem by Saturday, and 3 alterations waiting on the rack, and a broken overlock machine that she'd been hand-stitching around for 2 weeks. She didn't have time to look up. That was a Tuesday in March. The Tuesday that changed everything started 6 months earlier, in September, on the number 35 Jane bus going north. Chinara was standing, holding the overhead bar with one hand, a grocery bag with the other. It was raining the way Toronto rains in September. Not hard enough that you'd call it a storm, just enough to make everything gray and cold and slightly miserable. She'd spent $61 aidings at No Frills, and she had $12 left until Friday. She wasn't hungry. Not yet. She was being careful. The man got on at Eglinton. Nobody looked at him. That's the honest truth. Nobody on a Toronto bus looks at anyone. That's just how the city works. Everyone's sealed inside their own world. But even by those standards, this man was invisible. He was wearing a jacket that had seen too many winters. His shoes were wet through. He was carrying nothing. He sat down in the last available seat, across from the grocery bags of an older Ghanaian woman who shifted her bags without looking at him, and he put his hands on his knees and stared at the floor. Chinara looked at him. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the way his hands were shaking. Not from cold, exactly. From something else. The kind of shaking you do when you've been holding something heavy for a very long time, and your body has forgotten how to stop bracing for it. She looked away. She looked back. At Shepherd, 3 stops before her stop, she watched him stand up, and she saw his jacket fall open, and she saw that his pockets were empty. Not just no wallet visible. Empty. Flat. Nothing. He got off the bus. She got off the bus. She told herself she was going to Walmart. It was 1 block from Shepherd Station. It was on the way. She needed garbage bags. That was the reason. She followed him into the Walmart because she needed garbage bags. She watched him walk to the food section. She watched him pick up a can of soup, read the label, put it back, pick up a smaller can, read it, put it back. He stood there for a long moment with his hand resting on the shelf, not touching anything, just standing there. Chinara had $12. She went and stood beside him. "Excuse me," she said. "Can I help you get something?" He looked at her. He had tired eyes. Not sad, tired. The way your eyes look when you've been awake for a very long time, and you've stopped expecting things to get easier soon. "I'm fine," he said. "I have a little extra," she said. It was not true. I just got paid. That part was also not true. "Please, it's not a big deal." He was quiet for a moment. "My name is Addo," he said finally. "I haven't eaten since yesterday morning." She spent $11.40, a can of soup, a small loaf of bread, a carton of orange juice, 2 apples. She gave the cashier her last $12 and got 60 cents back and put it in her coat pocket and didn't let herself think about Friday. She walked him to the bus shelter outside. "Thank you," he said. "You didn't have to do that." "Eat something," she said. She got on the next bus and went home and made herself tea and ate crackers with peanut butter for dinner because there was nothing else in the apartment, and she hadn't wanted to spend money on herself when she only had $12. She didn't think about it again. She was too busy. Here's what you need to know about Chinara before this story goes any further. She came to Toronto from Accra 11 years ago, 23 years old, with a suitcase and a contact number for a cousin in Brampton, who turned out to be much less helpful than promised. She'd studied textile design in Ghana. She had a good eye and quick hands, and the kind of patience with detail that most people don't have anymore. She worked in a factory for 2 years, a call center for 1, a dry cleaner in Scarborough for 3, and then her uncle Kwabena, her mother's brother, who'd been in Toronto since the 90s and had built something small but real, offered her a job at his shop. She wasn't his employee. She was his successor. They both understood, even if they hadn't said it out loud. He was 64. His knees were going. His son was a software engineer in Waterloo and had no interest in alterations. Chinara was learning the business from the inside out. She was good at it. She was very good at it. She had a reputation, if you knew where to look, among the Nigerian and Ghanaian and Jamaican and Somali women in the neighborhood who needed wedding dresses altered and traditional garments fitted and bridesmaid dresses taken in on short notice. She charged fairly. She did it right the first time. Word moved the way word moves in tight communities. Person to person, church hall to church hall, WhatsApp group to WhatsApp group. And then the building changed hands. That was October, 3 weeks after the bus. A company called Varlin Properties sent a letter to Kwabena saying that the lease would not be renewed when it expired in February. The building had been sold. The new owners had plans for the ground floor. The letter was polite in the way that letters are polite when they know you have no leverage. Kwabena read it twice and put it down on the counter and didn't say anything. "Uncle," Chinara said. "I'm thinking," he said. He thought for 3 days. Then he told her he was going to retire, his knees. His heart doctor had been saying for 2 years that the stress was too much. He would retire, and he was sorry, and he would give her 3 months of her salary as a going away, and he was sorry. She told him she understood. She thanked him. She went home and sat at her kitchen table for a long time. She had done the math many times. She knew the numbers. To open her own shop, even a small one, even in a less expensive part of the city, she needed first and last month's rent, equipment, supplies, a business license, liability insurance. She had savings. She had been saving carefully the way she did everything. But not enough, not yet. She had about 4 months of runway. Then she would have to find other work and start the dream over slower. The complaints started in November. She had found a small space, a converted storefront in a strip mall on Keele, the kind of place that had been a hair salon, and before that a video rental store, and before that probably something else. The landlord, a man named Gary Fitch, was reasonable. The rent was manageable. She had painted it herself on 2 Saturdays. She'd had a sign made. She was ready to open. The complaints came from the unit next door. His name was Wendell Pruitt. He had run a shoe repair shop in that strip mall for 11 years, and he had, Chinara would only understand this later, an arrangement with Gary Fitch that he'd believed gave him some informal right of approval over neighboring tenants. He had expected the space to sit empty so he could use the parking spots out front. He had not expected a black woman with a sewing machine and a business license. The first complaint was about the ventilation. He filed it with the city. An inspector came, found nothing wrong, left. The second complaint was about noise. Her machine, he claimed, was audible through the shared wall. An inspector came, found nothing, left. The third complaint accused her of operating a commercial business without proper zoning, which was not true, and which the city confirmed was not true after 2 weeks. And one very stressful phone call with Chinara, explaining her business license number 3, separate times. She opened anyway, December 1st. She put a small card in the window. Alterations and custom sewing. Appointment recommended. Walk-ins welcome. The women in the neighborhood found her. They always do. She was altering a Kentaprint dress for a woman named Abina. Not a character in this story. Just a customer, just a real person with a real event to attend. When Wendell Pruitt walked into her shop for the first time, he didn't say anything. He looked at the space. He looked at her. He looked at the sewing machine. He left. 2 days later, Gary Fitch called her. "There's been a complaint about odors," Gary said, sounding uncomfortable. "Coming from your unit, what odors?" Chinara said. Not a question. A statement. She was holding the phone very carefully. "Fabric dye," Gary said. "Chemicals. I don't use dye," Chinara said. "I do alterations. I use thread. I use a steam iron, that is all." Silence. "I believe you," Gary said, "but I have to document it." "Document it," she said. "Document that there are no odors because I don't use any chemicals." She hung up the phone and stood in the middle of her shop, which smelled like nothing except the lavender spray she used on the ironing board, and she made herself breathe slowly. She knew who was filing the complaints. She had known from the second one. She did not have money for a lawyer. She did not have money to fight this properly. What she had was a business license, a clean inspection record, and customers who trusted her. She kept going. She kept going through December and January. She kept going when Wendell Pruitt started parking his van directly in front of her door on days she had appointments. She kept going when a review appeared online. 1 star, no detail, just 1 star, that she was almost certain came from him. She kept going when Gary Fitch called again in January to say the building owners were considering restructuring the tenant agreements, and he wasn't sure what that meant, but he wanted to give her a heads up. She kept going because she had no other option, and because her mother, who was still in Accra, had asked her last month on the phone how the shop was going, and Chinara had said, "Mama, it's going very well," and she intended to make that true. The man in the wool coat came in on a Tuesday in March, as I said. He sat down in the waiting chair near the door, while Kwabena handled the front. Chinara came out of the back to check on a pickup, and she saw him, and something in her stomach went very still. He was different now. The tired eyes were the same, but the coat was different. The posture was different. He sat the way people sit when they are accustomed to having space around them. He looked at her. "You don't remember me," he said. She did. She remembered the Walmart. She remembered the can of soup. She remembered the 60 cents change in her pocket that she'd spent on bus fare the next morning. "Ado," she said. He stood up. He was taller than she remembered. "I've been looking for you for 2 months," he said. "I remembered Jane and Finch. I remembered the dry cleaner. I wasn't sure if you worked here or if it was just the bag. You remembered the bag. OC's dry cleaning. It was on the bag." He paused. "The man outside told me you're not here anymore. He said you have your own place now on Keele. He gave me the address." She looked at Kwabena, who was suddenly very interested in something on the counter. "Come," she said. "Come to my shop." They walked the 6 blocks in the gray March cold, and she unlocked the door and turned on the lights, and he stood in the middle of her small, clean, careful shop and looked at everything. The racks, the machines, the bolts of fabric in the corner, the little card in the window, and then he looked at her. "Can I sit down?" he said. "Please," she said. He sat. She made tea on the small electric kettle she kept in the back. She brought 2 cups and sat across from him at the cutting table. "I need to tell you something," Ado said, "and I need you to hear me before you say anything." "All right," she said. "In September," he said. "I had been in Toronto for 6 days. I came from London. I had been living in London for 8 years, running a business, a logistics company. We worked across West Africa and Europe, 37 employees." He paused. "I had a partner, business partner. He had been with me from the beginning, and in August I found out he had been moving money out of the company for 2 years. Not a small amount. Enough that when the auditors came, the entire company, everything we had built, was frozen pending investigation. He held his cup of tea with both hands. I was not charged with anything. I had done nothing wrong. But everything was frozen. My accounts, here and in the UK, were flagged for the duration of the investigation. I had some cash. I had my coat. I had an old contact in Scarborough who said I could sleep on his couch while things were resolved. He looked at the table. He was not home when I arrived. His number had changed. I was on a bus on Jane Street with $11 in my pocket and no one to call who could actually help me quickly enough, and I had not eaten since the morning before. Chinara wrapped her hands around her cup. The investigation was resolved in November, he said. My name was cleared. My assets were unfrozen. My lawyers have been dealing with my former partner since December. He looked up at her. I want you to know that I looked for you because I wanted to thank you. Not because I'm a good person with nice manners. Because what you did, you had nothing. I could see it. And you did it anyway. And that night, sitting on your uncle's dry cleaning bag on a bus to Scarborough, that was the thing I kept thinking about. That there were still people who did that. Chinara was quiet for a long moment. How did it get resolved? She said finally. My former partner's other creditors filed separately, and the forensic accountants were able to isolate his fraud clearly from my operations. The courts moved faster than expected. He paused. And I had very good lawyers. Good, she said. I want to help you, he said. With the shop. I don't need help, she said. The reflex was automatic. She hated it, even as it came out of her mouth. There's a man named Wendell Pruitt, Addo said, who has filed 6 complaints against this business in 3 months. She went very still. How do you know that? She said. Because I asked the right people to look, he said. I'm not trying to be in your business, Chinara, but when I was trying to find you, I asked around in the neighborhood. People told me about the shop. They told me about the complaints. They told me about the van parked in front of your door. It's handled, she said. It's not, he said, gently. The building ownership group, the one that bought this strip mall in January, they've received 3 complaints from Wendell Pruitt. He has a relationship with one of their property managers. He has been pushing to have your lease terminated early on the basis of tenant complaints. Your landlord doesn't know yet because it hasn't reached the formal stage, but it will, probably within 60 days. The shop was very quiet. How do you know this? She said again. Because the building ownership group, Addo said, is a subsidiary of a real estate holding company, and that company's majority shareholder is my firm. The tea was getting cold. Neither of them touched it. I'm not telling you this to be dramatic, he said. I'm telling you because I want you to know that what I'm about to say is not a favor. It's a correction. What Wendell Pruitt is doing is harassment. What the property manager allowed to happen by passing along his complaints without vetting them is a failure of process. Both of those things are going to be addressed. And my lease? Chinara said. Your lease will be renewed at the same rate for 3 years, Addo said, if you want it. She put down her cup. Why 3 years, she said. Because that's how long I think it will take you to be ready to expand, he said. And I'd like to have a conversation with you, when you're ready, about what that expansion could look like. If you want to have that conversation, you are not obligated. You don't know anything about my business, she said. I know you spent your last $12 on a stranger who was hungry, he said. That tells me something about how you run things. What happened to Wendell Pruitt? He came into the shop the following Friday. Chinara was with a customer. He stood at the counter and waited with the particular impatience of a man who has decided he's been patient long enough. When the customer left, he said, I've been hearing things. I'm sure you have, Chinara said. She was rehanging a blouse on a hanger. Her hands were steady. I've been hearing the new ownership wants to redo the whole strip. New tenants, new leases, the whole thing. He paused. I've had this space for 11 years. I know, Chinara said. I'm not saying anything, he said. I'm just saying, if there's a conversation to be had about the block, about how things are done around here, I thought maybe you and I could. Mr. Pruitt, Chinara said, I have alterations due at 5 o'clock. I would appreciate it if you didn't park your van in front of my door anymore. That's all I have to say to you. He left. He parked in his own spot after that. The online review disappeared. The complaints stopped. Chinara never filed anything. She never threatened anything. She just stayed. She called her mother that Sunday. Mama, the shop is going very well, she said. This time it was true. Her mother said, I know, my daughter, I know it would. The way mothers say things like that, not as prediction, not as pride, but as a simple fact they have been holding quietly all along, waiting for you to catch up to it. Ado came back the following Tuesday as they had arranged, to have the conversation about the future. He brought coffee. She had cleared the cutting table. They sat across from each other in the small, bright shop with the card still in the window. Alterations and custom sewing. Appointment recommended. Walk-ins welcome. And they talked for 3 hours about what it could become. What it did become is still becoming. That is the honest answer. She had not finished yet. She did not want to be finished. She wanted to still be in the middle of building it, still finding the next room, still learning what she was actually capable of. But on the number 35, bus going north on a September evening, with $12 in her pocket and 60 cents change coming back, she had seen a man's hands shaking on his knees, and she had thought, I can do something about that. That was the whole thing. That was everything. If you're watching this, and thank you, genuinely, for watching, I want to ask you something. Have you ever helped someone when you had almost nothing left to give? Not because you could afford to. Not because you knew it would come back to you. Just because you saw someone and you thought, I can do something about that. Drop a comment. Drop your flag. Tell me where in the world you're watching from tonight. And if this story meant something to you, if you believe that kindness still moves in this world, quietly, without announcement, hit subscribe. Because we have more stories like this one. And we're just getting started.